How are you doing today? Are you awake? How is, nice soul nose right there. How is fall treating you? Awful. It became fall really fast, didn't it? It went straight from the 80s and the 90s right to the 50s. And now it's October. That wonderful month when all the little gremlins and all the little technical difficulties start coming out in our sound system. And it concludes with what used to be a religious holiday celebrating the heroes of the faith, but what our culture has turned into a celebration of everything demonic. It is such a fun time of the year, isn't it? It is a beautiful time of the year. Of course, that is when we're not having to deal with the leftovers of a hurricane in 50-degree weather. It's beautiful. The leaves will be changing soon. Who has their fall decorations out? Do you have your pumpkins and stuff out? Well, I can tell you, I know that there are some people who definitely have their pumpkins out, because as I was driving the other day, just down the road from the church here, there is a pumpkin patch. It's a couple acres in size. I think it's owned by an Amish farmer. And I drive by this field quite frequently, and I've been watching the pumpkins grow, because when they first plant pumpkins, it looks like this weird plant, and what is going on in this field. And then even after they grow, it really is an odd plant when you think about it. It grows this giant orange thing on the ground. It's weird. But as I was driving by the pumpkin patch the other day, and I don't know why we call it a pumpkin patch instead of a pumpkin field. These are the things I think about while I'm driving. But as I was driving by the pumpkin patch on Monday this week, Monday evening, I noticed a car off the road next to the pumpkin patch with its four-way flashers on. And if you remember Monday was a chilly day. It was raining. It had been raining for like 72 hours at that point. So I slowed down, concerned that the car had gone off the road and gotten stuck in the ditch. However, it turns out that the car had not gotten stuck in the mud, because as I came by investigating, two little kids came bounding out of the pumpkin patch toward the car, each with a pumpkin under their arm. And they happily ran to the car and put the pumpkins in the trunk lid that popped open as they came up. So I continued down the road, and I realized that, of course, the car was not stuck. No, what was going on was two little children were stealing pumpkins from an Amish farmer. It's actually worse than that when you think about it, because those kids were driven to the pumpkin patch and told to go steal pumpkins by whatever adult was sitting waiting in that car to pop the trunk lid. They were being taught that if they wanted something, just go take it. And I'm sure that at some point in their lives, those two kids, as they grow up and get older, someone somewhere will wonder why they steal things or do other illegal things. And it's because they were taught to violate God's word in the small things from the youngest age. It was a great example of parenting that I saw there on Monday. Of course, you all know that it's pretty par for the course in our world today. I'm also sure that those two children are not the only ones who've stolen pumpkins from that patch. And as I drove by, of course, there was very little I could do. If I'd stopped and tried to prevent the theft, whatever adult was waiting in that car surely would have gotten out and at least yelled at me, or maybe worse. I don't really know who owns the field in order to even tell them what happened. If you do, maybe the church should make some sort of compensation, because it probably happens all the time. It's not our fault, but Amish people have enough reason to dislike and distrust the English already. If I called the police, I'm sure they would have laughed at the report of two stolen pumpkins. Maybe right now you are sitting here wondering why I'm making such a big deal about two little gourds. Well, here's why. There was very little I could do about this situation except to point out to you the truth. It is wrong to steal. I understand that we live in a corrupt society that tends to decide for itself what right or wrong is, and I understand that if I'd confronted the adult in that car, they would have had all kinds of justification as to why what they were doing and what they told their kids to do was fine, and why I should keep my nose out of their business. But the truth is still the truth. Stealing is wrong. But I bring it up because the situation raises a bigger question for us. And that question is, how do you live in a corrupt world? How do we follow God and live our lives for Him, surrounded by a world where everybody decides to do what they think is right, instead of looking to God for the definitions of right and wrong? How do we live in that world? And the way I see it, you have three choices. One, you forget all about God and just live like everybody else. Two, you say you follow God, and you try to sound religious, but in the end, you decide what's right and wrong for yourself anyway. And that's really the same as number one. You might as well just forget all about God and live like the world does. Or three or two, however you're numbering this. The other option is you follow God no matter what it costs, and realize that it's going to be tough because we live in a tough place. Those are your options. And what we realize is that this is also the world that is the setting for the book of Ruth. We know from the book of Judges that this time in Israel's history was a time that is frequently described by the phrase, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Doesn't that sound like today? That's what I watched happen. They wanted pumpkins, so they did what they thought was right in their own eyes and stole them. They would have justified the behavior and said it was right for them to do it. This is where we live. It's also the world in which the book of Ruth takes place. Everyone doing what was right in their own eyes. And in the text that was read to you today, we see Naomi, good old bitter, doing what is right in her eyes, and she comes up with a plan. Now, Paul told you last week that these two widows, Ruth and Naomi, had two options in life: prostitution or gleaning. And that Ruth had been working hard through the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, gleaning for herself and Naomi. She'd been working hard to provide for them. But after a little while, Naomi decided that wasn't good enough. So she points out to Ruth what we saw in last week as well, that Boaz, in whose field she's been gleaning and whose favor she's found, is a kinsman of the family of Elimelech. And we know, you'll remember from last week, that the job of the kinsman redeemer was a very important thing in the Old Testament. The kinsman redeemer had a number of jobs. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the person in the family chosen as the kinsman redeemer. It was his obligation to be the avenger of blood. His job was to make sure that the murderer of a family member was held responsible for the crime. It was also his job, if a family member was irresponsible and was sold into slavery to pay a debt, it was the kinsman redeemer's job to buy that family member out of slavery. But that's not all. If a family member lost their land due to mismanagement or irresponsibility, it was the responsibility of the kinsman redeemer to buy the land back. And it was also the responsibility of the kinsman redeemer to carry on the family name by marrying a childless widow and having a child with her in the dead man's name. It was a major responsibility to be the kinsman redeemer, and it was taken very seriously at this time. The kinsman redeemer is basically the savior of the family. So Naomi says to Ruth, that's Boaz for us. He's our kinsman redeemer. And of course, the question might come to your mind, well, why hasn't Boaz done his job as kinsman redeemer yet? Well, we'll see in a minute that Naomi is not entirely honest about this plan. So she says to Ruth, Boaz is their kinsman redeemer, and she concocts this scheme to force Boaz to do what she wants. So she tells Ruth that Boaz will be with his men winnowing the barley, separating the good grain from the rest of the harvested plant. And since the men were doing this, they were going to have some good man time. They would work hard and eat and drink and then have good time with each other, having man time. Then the men would sleep there to protect the grain, because as we know from the book of Judges, frequently other nations and other people came into Israel and stole their crops. So the men would sleep with the grain to protect it overnight. And Naomi tells Ruth to get all clean and get all smelling nice and dress up in her best clothes and go out there and wait. She says that when Boaz lays down to sleep, Ruth should go uncover his feet and then see what happens. Now, we have to realize that this plan Naomi comes up with, we may miss this, we have to realize that this is a dangerous plan. Ruth is going to be out at night, all alone, all pretty and smelling nice. This is a dangerous situation for a woman even today, but especially back then. Anyone could come upon her and do anything they wanted to her. In addition, even if she gets out there safe, Boaz or one of the other men there at the threshing floor could take advantage of her. It is a dangerous plan that Naomi comes up with for Ruth. But Naomi is counting on the goodness of Boaz. In fact, she's scheming against his goodness. And this may not be clear to us, but when Naomi tells Ruth to uncover Boaz's feet, this is not a sexual advance on the part of Ruth, as some people may say. Naomi is having Ruth make a direct appeal to the principle in the law about the kinsman redeemer. This is going to come up later in the story, but in Deuteronomy 25, it says that if a man is unwilling to fulfill his duty as the kinsman redeemer, the widow should go to the elders of the town gate and say, "My husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. Then the elders of the town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, 'I don't want to marry her,' his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face and say, 'This is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. And the man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled.'" So when Naomi instructs Ruth to go uncover Boaz's feet, it's basically telling Ruth to go to Boaz and say, "Do your job as kinsman redeemer or else. I'm appealing to you here in the middle of the night in private. I'm uncovering your feet in the middle of the night. But if you don't, I'm going to go to the town elders, and in front of everybody, we're going to uncover your feet, and you're going to be the unsandaled. I'm uncovering your feet now, and if you don't do your job, your feet are going to get uncovered in front of everybody." She is saying, do your job as kinsman redeemer or else. This is a manipulation on the part of Naomi. It is not a gentle reminding him of his responsibility. It is a threat to Boaz. Naomi is attempting to force Boaz to do what she wants, and Ruth is right there in the middle of it. Now, as we continue to read the chapter, we'll see that there's this, we'll say, wrinkle to the story that Naomi just didn't mention. There's this little thing. Ruth goes to and does the plan Naomi, this dangerous plan that Naomi told her to do. She does it just as she's supposed to do. She sneaks to the threshing floor. She waits and watches where Boaz goes to sleep. She sneaks over in the middle of the night and uncovers his feet and waits. And Boaz wakes up in the middle of the night, probably because his feet were cold, and finds Ruth laying there. Now, Ruth is a little nicer than Naomi. She says, "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." She appeals to his station as kinsman redeemer in a more gentle way. But there is still this threat in Naomi's plan that if Boaz doesn't do his job, he'll be exposed in public. Now, I don't know how you react when someone or else's you. I don't know how you respond when someone attempts to force you to do something. I know I don't respond well. But Boaz responds with grace. He's impressed by her, and he's flattered by her approach to him as kinsman redeemer. But he points out it's not his job, because there's a closer relative. There's another man who's in line in front of Boaz to do all the kinsman redeeming functions. What did Paul say last week? Well, slap me twice and call me Myrtle. Well, Myrtle, I guess Naomi just forgot to mention that guy. She must have forgotten all about that other guy who's a closer relative, right? That other guy, she must have forgot about him, who's actually the kinsman redeemer for Ruth and her. She must have forgot about him. Otherwise, she would have sent Ruth to that guy's fields and to that guy's threshing floor. So she must have forgot about him, because otherwise, That guy would have gotten the threat to fulfill his job as kinsman redeemer or else, right? Naomi must have forgotten about this other relative. Of course she didn't forget about that. Naomi wanted Boaz to do the redeeming, not that other guy. That's why she made up this scheme in the middle of this whole thing in the middle of the night. Don't misunderstand this. Naomi sent Ruth to carry out a dangerous plan, to go to Boaz and say, do your job or else, knowing all along that Boaz was not the first in line to do the job. Naomi is trying to get what she wanted, and she didn't care how it needed to be accomplished to get it to happen, so she was doing what she wanted to get to happen. Now, if it was me, if I was Ruth, I'd be a little angry. When Boaz says he's not the redeemer, I'd be a little perturbed with Naomi. I didn't get all the information here. Now, I told you that Naomi is not a character that we should be like. She is not a person of noble character like Boaz or Ruth. And what happens in the middle of this, in the middle of the night, is Boaz probably realizes that Ruth has been sent to do this by Naomi. And Naomi is a schemer. She tries to get what she wants by any means necessary. But fortunately, Boaz is not like Naomi. He's a good man. He tells Ruth that he's going to take care of this whole kinsman redeemer thing by the end of the day. And he tells her to stay there for the night. Why? Because it is dangerous for a woman to be out alone like that at night. Boaz protects Ruth where Naomi didn't. Then in the morning, he gives her grain and sends her away before anyone could know that she was there. So now he's protecting her reputation, something Naomi didn't care about when she sent Ruth to do the whole plan. And Ruth goes back to Naomi and tells her everything that happened, and Naomi says, good, 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 knowing that the scheme had worked. Now, again, I would be upset if I was Ruth. She was set up. I might be angry if I was Boaz. I mean, his hand is forced. The story, I don't like this story. I'm not mad at Ruth. She's caught in the middle. Key information was withheld from her that she would have no way of knowing. She's tactful and she's respectful throughout, even in the middle of the scheme. The story upsets me because Naomi manipulates and lies, at least by omission. She schemes and she forces. She has Ruth threaten Boaz wrongly, all to get what she wants. And I won't give away the rest of the story, but it seems like all of Naomi's wrong behavior is going to get her what she wants. It's going to work. That upsets me. Naomi behaves badly. She does things that we should not do, and it seems like it's going to get her ahead in life. But that's the way the world works, isn't it? Sometimes in the immediate, the bad people get ahead. Those who manipulate get what they want. Cheaters win. The person who steals the pumpkins gets the pumpkin from the pumpkin patch. That's the way it works in our society. That's the way it works in any society where each person does what's right in their own eyes. But it all brings us back to that same question I asked you earlier. How do you live in a corrupt world? In a society where everyone does what's right in their own eyes, how do you decide right from wrong? In a society where those who disobey God, where those who scheme and manipulate often seem to get ahead, do you follow God or do you live like them? You see, in this story, we have Naomi, who does what she thinks is right. She twists the truth. She manipulates. She schemes. She forces others to get what she wants. Frankly, she uses Ruth to get what she wants. Even to the point of putting Ruth's good character and her physical safety in danger, because Naomi is like our society today. If Naomi wanted some pumpkins, she'd have Ruth steal them from the Amish guy. And on the other hand, we have Boaz, who was an honorable man. When the world goes its own way, Boaz follows God. Boaz protects those who are unprotected. He steps up to take care of those who have no one looking out for them. He shelters those who are being used and manipulated. When his hand is forced by the schemes of others, Boaz continues to follow God and does not seek retribution against the schemer. Boaz is a good guy. So who are you going to be like? You going to be Naomi? You going to get yours and get ahead however you need to? You going to manipulate and scheme? Or are you going to do what you decide is right? Or are you going to be like Boaz? Are you going to do what God says when it's hard, when society is against you, when people scheme and manipulate? You're going to be like Boaz, like a salmon swimming up the river. Society is going one way, Boaz is going against the flow. That's hard. That's difficult. When you live like that, you look dumb. If Boaz wants a pumpkin, Boaz has to pay for it. Naomi's get pumpkins for free. Every moment of our lives, we are faced with two options. Be a Naomi or be a Boaz. Follow the way of the world or do what's right in your own eyes or follow God. Which option you choose reveals where your heart is. It reveals what you value. It reveals who or what is really the God that you're following. Do we follow ourselves or do we follow God? We constantly have to remake this decision every second of our lives. We have to keep re-choosing to be like Boaz, to follow God. So, who are you going to be? Naomi or Boaz? The easy way? Do what's right in your own eyes? The way of our society? Or are you going to decide each second of your life to stand up and follow God, regardless of what they say, regardless of what it costs you or how hard it is? Who are you going to be? Well, let me tell you this. The world has enough Naomis in it. Be a Boaz.